Thanks. So as I mentioned, we will be working through this PowerPoint that I sent out to everyone yesterday, and with the exception of one slide, everything is exactly as it was. I really don't anticipate this taking more than 2.5 hours or so. Hopefully we can sneak in a little 5-10 minute break in there at some point so everyone can kind of decompress and process the information that they've received this morning. But please don't just take this as an assault of information on you. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask them as we are working through this presentation. All right, so this is the agenda today. Obviously, we've already gone through the introductions and then some of the outcomes for today, what you should be expected to know. Granted, we are going to be giving you a lot of information about not just the IIA process, but the accreditation system itself. So there is going to be a lot of information to unpack. So if you don't remember literally everything that we are telling you today, we will be here as a resource for you to help guide you through this process. And then, as I mentioned, yes, we will be going in depth through the process to gain full approval from the commission. We will be going over some of the expectations and responsibilities of the unit head, and then how best to keep up communication with us at the commission. Things like updating your institutional information, and then obviously there are going to be some fees associated with this, but we will go over this in more depth much later on in this presentation. We've gone through these introductions, so we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this slide. And then I'm going to turn on over to Cheryl, who is our administrator on accreditation, and she will go over the agency structure. Oh, you're on mute, Cheryl.
Yes, you think after almost 2 years we'd get this, right? So anyhow, we wanted to at least kind of cover the agency structure so that that doesn't feel so mysterious to all of you. You will be touching various parts of our agency. So we wanted to kind of just give you some background and give you an opportunity to ask questions. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have questions as we go through this. I'm happy to, and if the rest of our staff could kind of look to see if there are hands raised, that'd be great. But so the commission is our policy making body. That is the large gubernatorial appointed body. It's a 19-member body, 14 of which are appointed by the governor, 1 spot by the superintendent of public instruction, and then we have 4 ex officio members who are non-voting members, and they are the ones who represent the higher ed community. So we have 1 representing the University of California, 1 representing the California State University system, 1 representing the community colleges, and 1 representing the private and independent sector. So those are 4 that bring the voice of the higher ed education community, but they do not get voting rights, but they get to participate in every other way. So the ones that are appointed by the governor are across the board in terms of credential areas. So the vast majority are teachers, but there are also administrators, school board members, credential holders who are administrative credential holders, but not, but those that represent those other areas like the PPS credentials. So it's a nice wide variety of individuals who are involved in the policy making. And as we go through it here, you'll see that there's a difference in approach in terms of who has what responsibility when it comes to accreditation. So the commission sets the accreditation policy, and another body, which we'll talk about in a minute, actually implements the system for the agency. However, the commission is the body that you will have to go through to get approval as an institution that is a commission approved institution, whereas this other body will approve your programs and take you once you're sort of in the system. So your first go around will be with the commission, and so you will you'll get a couple of opportunities to talk directly with the commissioners. So next chart. So the commission staff, just to give you a sense of, we're actually a small state agency. We're about 150, 160 folks. That is small compared to the Department of Education. We are separate from the Department of Education, and we deal with the credentialing primarily of staff that are serving the public school system. Our executive director, Mary Vixie Sandy, has been with us a number of years, and it has been, you know, she left for a little while way back when, but she has grown up here at the commission. So she's our current executive director. We have several divisions. We have a professional services division that you will interact with, and that is where we all sort of live. And we deal with examinations, policy, standard setting, and accreditation. So those are sort of our areas. We also do grants. So there's a lot of investment, state investment related to teacher recruitment and educator recruitment these days. And so we administer those. So we're the body that when you think policy, we go to the table at the commission and work with the community, the education community, to kind of come up with a policy, implement the accreditation system, and the exams and the teacher recruitment efforts. So we have a lot on our plate. We're a small part of the staff. There's probably, I think, around 30 of us, give or take a few. We also have the certification division. They are the ones who actually issue the licenses or the certificates to the individuals. They deal with the individual basis. You know, as a person has a question about their own credential, they're the ones who we send them to. And then we have the division of professional practices. These are our attorneys and our investigators. So when educators get in trouble and they may be putting at risk their license, the division of professional practices does the investigation, works with the court system, that kind of thing, to determine, you know, what the repercussions are for educators that have some issues. So that's our staff. And of course we have, you know, IT and human resources and that kind of thing. The other body that you will deal with quite a bit. So you're going to deal with the commission to get approved as an institution, who the commission has the authority to approve the institutions, which is what you're going through right now. And the Committee on Accreditation is the body that is delegated and appointed by the full commission to make those decisions and to carry out the accreditation system. So they're the body that's really in charge of ensuring the quality, ensuring that programs are aligned to the standards that the commission adopts and the requirements that the commission adopts. So they're a body made up of 12 individuals, equally divided between the K-12 community and the higher education community. So we have 6 and 6. They represent all parts of California. We try to really make sure that we have a good balance across the board, whether it's, you know, gender, ethnicity, but definitely rural, suburban. Try to get a sense of the various types of educator preparation programs and institutions. So we try always to have a UC representative, COC representative, a small school representative, a county office representative, that kind of thing. So we really do a lot of thinking about the balance so that we have a wide variety of perspectives. Same thing with trying to get expertise across the board in the various credentials. There are a lot of credentials. I don't know if you're aware of that. There's over 40 some odd credentials that can be offered. Everything from teaching all the way to school librarian, school nurse, the PPS credentials, administrative services, and then many flavors of some of them, like education specialists, many flavors of those. So there's a lot of expertise that's needed to keep the ball rolling on accreditation, to make sure that when the Committee on Accreditation takes up reports from the field on the quality of the preparation that's being provided at an institution, that they have a sufficient amount of expertise and understanding about how institutions operate and how programs are required to operate. What are those levels of the standards and the professional judgment that needs to be made on those. So those are the two bodies that you're going to deal with a lot, and we're going to talk about when you go to whom for what. But you will be approved by the commission, and then the Committee on Accreditation will approve your programs, the specific programs. Together, those two make up initial institutional approval, essentially. You can't offer a program to start until both those bodies have acted. They are both considered public bodies, so everything they do has to happen on a public basis, so they have to be in an open public meeting. Right now, obviously, because of COVID, we're on Zoom, but generally these are meetings that are conducted in Sacramento, and we have anybody who wants to attend either one of these meetings are able to do that. And so all of their conduct has to happen in a very transparent way. So that's the Committee on Accreditation. Any questions on that before I move on? All right, no, great. Okay, and you can find more information on our website on who the current members are if you're interested. So just a few things that we wanted to just, kind of global things before we get really into the weeds here. But obviously the commission is looking for high quality programs. They're always very interested in areas of shortage, but we approve them we approve programs across the board. We know that induction programs are happening at all, at every local level. So that, of course, they're always looking at, but, really focusing on the quality of the programs. And so you will get a lot of questions from the Commission and the Committee on Accreditation about how you're thinking about doing stuff, how, what your plans are for making sure. And if you talk to Hart and Michelle and others, we sort of know what those push points are. What are they going to be looking for? Because they're going to ask you about the quality of your faculty. They're going to ask you about how you're partnering with your local communities, those kinds of things. We can guarantee what they're going to ask in some cases, but we also don't know. They have other questions as well. Just a few other things.
Carol, before you go into the next piece of information, Amanda, you had a question?
Oh yes, Amanda, thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
I do. So I'm curious about how you guys are defining, or not defining, but how you guys are identifying areas of shortage in a state as vast as ours. Like oh, there's actually this program, but actually it's based in this,
Yes.
it's such a patchwork. So could you speak about that a little bit?
Very good question. So there are areas we know that are shortage areas across the state. Special education, bilingual education. We know that those are needs everywhere. But when Hart begins to talk to you about the precondition that talks about demonstration of need, this is where you make your case. This is where you say, hey, in our service area, whatever that is, everybody's service area might be different. It might be your local school, it might be your district, it might be your county, it might be the entire state. It just depends on who you're planning to serve. You get to make that case. Here's what we know about vacancies. Here's what we know about emergency permits that are being offered in the area. Here's what our projected needs are. So you get to make that case to the commission. And so that standard is actually, or that precondition is one in which we have wrestled with a lot in the last year, because the commission really wants to see some evidence for the need. So I'm sure Hart will give you more information as we get down into that section, but that is an area that the commission has been really focused on. So there's this weird historical precedent for this BA in professional education. And unlike California is different than a lot of other states in that the way we have structured it historically is that you get your subject matter in your undergraduate, and then you go on to have your professional education program later on in what used to be called the fifth year. We all know that is changing. The pathways were much more open in terms of pathways to an education profession, but the historical nature of some of this is still in law. So the BA in professional education is only used for can only be used for multiple subject ed specialists, pupil personnel services. So if you want a single subject credential, they're going to have to get a BA in something other than professional education. And this again, this may be something that policy-wise may be changing over the next few years. I don't know, but just so you know that. The next thing we wanted to mention, because there are a lot of charters that are beginning to get interested in offering their own programs, charter management organizations themselves are not an eligible program sponsor. A charter school with a CDS code is. So it is okay if you plan to serve the entire universe of your charters. That's perfectly fine, but we just need you to indicate which one of your schools is going to be the official charter program sponsor. So that's just a piece. I wish I could change that law. I can't. It just is what it is. So the only approved program sponsors are an institution of higher education that is regionally accredited, or a school or county office with a CDS code. So that's important for you to know. And then we sometimes talk about subject matter programs. And when we're talking about that, those are they meet the subject matter requirement before a preparation program. And those have different requirements. So sometimes we may intermingle the language. So please make sure that we're clear when we're talking about which type of programs. Okay, so then more things to note. Not all eligible institutions are eligible to offer all types of teacher preparation programs. So make sure that you talk to Hart and Michelle about, can we offer this? So an example is that an LEA, a local education agency, a school or a county office can only offer, for preliminary programs, can only offer the intern pathway. A student teaching pathway is not an option for a local education agency. So just so you're aware of that. And there are other really bizarre examples. So institutions cannot propose additional programs after you submit the application. So this is where you walk a fine line between, you're going to get approved at some point for a provisional period of time. This is your time, and Hart, we'll talk more about this. This is your time that you're gonna offer the program. The candidates are gonna get recommended for the credential because you're officially approved, but the commission approves you for like a 2 to 3 or 4 year period of time, depending on how long your program is. You wanna make sure that you tell us right now, or at least before you turn the documentation, is what programs you really realistically want to run during that provisional period of time, because we're not going to let you add any additional programs. Your provisional period is sort of set in stone in terms of what programs you want to offer. Now, some programs have listed the kitchen sink thinking that they're going to do that. That's also not very helpful. So really just think seriously about, okay, we want to offer these 2 programs. Later on, you can submit for any other programs you want. That's perfectly fine after you get fully approved. So this is just something we really want you to think hard about. In part, it raises some concern, I think, among the commissioners if you list a whole bunch of programs, because how realistic is that to happen in the first few years? So, I guess my message to you would be to start small with, 1, 2, 3 programs at the very most. And then you could always add more after your provisional period is over with. Another thing to note is education specialists, and I didn't hear any of you say that you're going to offer ed specialists, although I did hear induction, that's fine. And your pupil personnel services, so for those of you who are offering pupil personnel services, those are in a transition to the brand new standards. So, and you have Shira working with you guys, so that's perfect, right, Shira? She was very much involved in the new standards, so great resource for you all. The pupil personnel services, you can certainly submit to those now. We are allowing programs to transition to those. The ed specialist ones are a little bit more challenging because they require regulatory work, and we're in the process of doing that. So, but I didn't hear anybody want to offer that at the moment. So those are just random things just for you to have at this point in time. All right. So 101, the reason why we have you come here is because there's a lot of information, and we wanted to make sure that we emphasize that it will take you some time to put this process in place. We are limited by people that have the availability to review. We use people from the field in these programs that you're offering to review documentation. So they're volunteers. They've got full-time jobs. We have about 500 of them that we have been able to use over time. They're called the Board of Institutional Reviewers. So there's a process. We'll talk to you about how long that takes. We wanted to make sure that you know the requirements and the expectations around those. Wanted to really emphasize partnerships and collaboration. That is an area that the commission is really honed in on. They want programs that are responsive to the schools, not programs that are, dreamed of in the ivory tower, but really that are working closely with the schools, the districts you serve, and that K-12 partners, and if you're a K-12, you're including your higher ed communities, that you're working really closely together and making sure you're addressing the needs out there. So the importance of partnerships and collaboration, you will get questions from the commissioners on that. I can guarantee it. And then, we wanted to make sure you understand the expectations of the commission's accreditation system. It's really important to let you know that, you're not applying for a grant program, you're applying for a licensure program, and licensure comes with responsibilities and expectations. And we try really hard as a staff to work closely with the field, with all of our program folks. And, I think we do a pretty good job. Some of what we deal with is very complicated and complex, and sometimes laws that are written really confusing. I would say lots of times the laws are written in a confusing way, but we're here for you. So you have staff here that you can bounce off questions and ask what you need to ask to help support you. So we are here to help. Okay, next one. And let's see. All right, so the accreditation system, we just wanted to touch base on here. So the purpose of the accreditation system, we have a couple of documents. Feel free to read them if you'd like. You don't have to, but on the commission's accreditation, on the commission's webpage, there is something called, there's a tab that says program sponsors. And that is where we live and work. Everything that we do in our professional services division with program sponsors, commission approved programs, all of our documentation is there. And there's a couple of foundational documents. So there is an accreditation framework, and that framework sets the policy. This is adopted by the commission. We look at it every few years to make sure we update it and make sure it's current. But the accreditation framework is online if you're interested in looking at the policy background. What's in Ed Code about this? What does it say the commission needs to do? What does the Committee on Accreditation needs to do? And then there is, so again, what it says in the framework is that the work or the implementation of the accreditation system is delegated from the commission to this Committee on Accreditation. So in Ed Code, it's very clear who has the authority to do what. We don't have to, try to figure that out. That's really clear. And then all of our processes and procedures are in another document called the Accreditation Handbook, and they're right next to each other. So if you go to the program sponsors and go to Committee on Accreditation, both of those are right up one above the other. The handbook, there is a section on initial institutional approval, and we're constantly kind of tweaking this and fiddling with it to make it clearer, make it more accurate. This system that Hart is describing to you today is fairly new, and it's much, much more rigorous than it used to be. And so we're finding little areas as we roll this out over the course of the last few years. We're making tweaks to things just to make it work better and more efficiently. But just to give you some background, the commission really wanted more touch points with institutions that are thinking about offering a program. They felt like the old process in the old days really kind of forced them into a corner to approve everybody. They really wanted an opportunity to share their perspective, to listen to what you all are thinking about and proposing, and to ask you questions directly instead of through staff. So there are times where we're going to ask you to come to the table and answer their questions when it gets to that point. You guys are the best people to do it. You know your programs, you know what you want to do. So rather than us, misinterpreting something or describing something that we just ask you to come to the table and answer for you yourself. Okay, go ahead. And then, so we're just going to turn this over to Hart, and he's going to describe the actual initial institutional approval process. Does anybody have any questions up to this point in time? Great. Okay. And I apologize. It is, we have to get agendas done for the commission, so I am going to bow out in a little bit as this gets going, but I will check back in later.
All right, so what everyone is here for today, the initial institutional approval process. We are going to go through this relatively in depth today, but as I mentioned earlier, obviously it's a lot of information. You might not be able to retain all of it today, but there will be an IIA consultant who can help you out and provide you with any of the information that you need along the way. As Cheryl mentioned, the IIA process has multiple decision points at the conclusion of each of its 5 stages. And even within some of those stages, there are multiple decision points. So for instance, in the 5th stage, which we will be going over in depth later, there are a couple different decision points there. Also talking about this, it's just to give you a sort of general idea about the timeline for completion of each of these stages. It will be different for each of them. So for a lot of the institutions here today, the timeline for completion of stage 1, you'll be pretty much done after today and after you provide us with a letter. So that one, you wish all stages would go that quickly, but that is not going to be the case, because for the majority of the stages 2 through 5, what you will be submitting during these stages, it will be an iterative process. So you will submit, we will have reviewers look at it, we will send you feedback, you will address the feedback, it will go back to reviewers until the reviewers determine that everything has been met regarding either preconditions or some of the standards. And one thing we need to hammer home here today is that the entire IIA process can take 5 years or longer for you to be fully approved. This does not mean that at some point along the way you won't be able to offer programs. There is a provisional period in which you will be able to do so. But for you to become fully approved and a part of the standard 7-year accreditation cycle, that will likely take 5 years or more. Okay, so just to give you sort of an overview, I sent you out all this stage chart the other day. We have made one change to it, so we can send you all an updated version of it. In stage 5, there is just one extra piece on the decision point there. You'll see number 2, but we will be going through this a little bit more in depth later. But yeah, we will send that all to you, but this is just to give you a sort of idea of what you will be going through in this long process. So you'll see that there are decision points where staff or the commission or the COA are making determinations about whether or not you move on in this process. And so stage 1, you have to meet 2 prerequisites. For IHEs, you need to provide us with regional accreditation. Campbellsville University, for instance, look them up. They are approved by, is it the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, whatever the WASC equivalent is for the South there. For LEAs, you will need to provide us with some sort of evidence of board approval, whether that is a signed letter from the unit head, or you provide us with some signed board minutes showing us that indeed the board has given the go-ahead for the institution to pursue a program. And with that, so for instance, Sierra Schools, we hadn't discussed this, but I believe that you are the charter management organization, and so you will have to select, as mentioned by Cheryl earlier, a specific charter school within the organization that has a CDS code to be the prospective program sponsor. And then the second prerequisite is attending today. And once we have the information from prerequisite 1, then you will be cleared to move on to stage 2, where you will be addressing the eligibility requirements, which Michelle will be talking about in just a minute. And so you can see that this decision point will be made by one of us here. We will receive your regional accreditation letter or the board approval minutes or the letter from the unit head indicating that the board has approved the institution to pursue a program that is approved by the commission. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to Michelle to talk about the stage 2 eligibility requirements.
Okay. So one of the things that you'll find in this entire IAA process is that we start broad and ask first about your foundational information, and then we get more and more specific. So the eligibility requirements, which we also sort of nicknamed the ERs, are important because they represent the groundwork of your proposed program. So it's with narratives and pieces of evidence in this stage 2 that you'll show us that you've established that solid foundation on which you will build your educator preparation program. So as you can see, the eligibility requirements, the ERs, there are 12 criteria to which your program must be aligned in order to be eligible to continue on to stage 3. Some of these ERs ask for assurances, which are official documents from the head of the institution confirming that a particular action or policy will take place or be followed. Other requirements will require a narrative asking you to show or explain something and provide supporting evidence. If a criterion asks for documentation of some sort, that evidence has to come from a standing source, your induction handbook, an MOU, a policy, so that we need to be assured that these documents weren't just created for this process, but will actually be ongoing. You'll submit your responses to the requirements as a narrative PDF document and then provide hyperlinks to those supporting pieces of evidence. And the IIA consultant who you'll be working with will help you with that. Now,
Michelle, could I jump in real quick on that front? So one thing that your institutions should consider is that the end goal of, well, not the, obviously the end goal is going to be full approval, but leading up to full approval is going to be your provisional site visit. And for that, you are going to have your accreditation website. So it depends on how you want to submit. I would recommend starting to send in all of your submissions on the website as opposed to a PDF here, just to start with the foundations of that. So you just have the building blocks to move through this process, and it'll make it much easier on you in the long run. We've been working with a lot of institutions through program review, and there has been a lot of success if maybe you're not the most tech savvy person on creating an institutional website using perhaps just like a Google Sites works really well and is fairly intuitive and relatively easy to use. So these are just things to consider as you are moving forward, because you are ultimately going to have to be submitting multiple things. So you'll have your eligibility requirements, you have your preconditions, common standards, and then you'll be resubmitting you'll be submitting your program review, and then another common standards, another preconditions along the way. So just think about these things now. It might be smart to start considering to put this stuff up on a website, because we are going to ask you to put everything up on the website anyways on every step of this process when you are going before any of these bodies because of ADA concerns. We cannot vouch for everything that you are submitting being ADA compliant. So we are asking you to put everything on your website because we cannot have anything on our website that is not ADA compliant.
And we'll be going over that more when we talk about criterion 6, which is communication and information. And Amanda, you had a question?
I do. Sorry if I'm dominating questions. And partly I think because we have just finished these things and submitted this stage 2 to you all a couple weeks ago. When you say they should be standing documents, but at least in our case, and I assume for others, we're a new institution. So like
Yes.
Yes, it is my staff handbook that I intend to be the staff handbook,
Yes.
but I don't actually have a staff yet.
Yes.
And is that sort of understood, or?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we understand a lot of this is hypothetical.
Okay.
So actually my next point was going to be that because you don't actually have a program yet, all of the things that you're writing about or showing are planned. So we're fully aware that you are providing right now really kind of drafts of certain things, but the eligibility requirements will show us that you're actually thinking about these and you are planning them. So they will be fully implemented by the time you have your provisional approval. So yes, we're aware that these are your intended policies, your intended procedures, and not something that's actually happening right now because you don't have any candidates.
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, and we're going to go through each of these criterion one at a time, but if you'll move on to the next, thank you. So there are some differences in the criteria. So while the responses to VERs, they are your own because each of you has a unique program, your assigned IIA consultant will help you with developing those responses to the 12 different requirements in order to be eligible to move on in the IA process. All 12 do have to be aligned to their respective requirements. For criteria 1 through 9, the CTC, we assess alignment and make the recommendation to the commission that each criteria is aligned. But for criteria 10, 11, and 12, it actually is the CTC the commission that really looks at that criteria and assesses alignment. We will summarize it for them. And that's because those final 3, it's the nature of those last 3 criteria. They're broader in scope, and the commission really wants to review those for themselves. So you'll see that 10, 11, and 12 are about mission and vision, history, and then capacity and resources. So we do provide evidence guidance document on our IIA webpage. I strongly recommend that you bookmark that page on your browser bar because you will be going to it frequently. So those guidance document provides examples of possible evidence, but it also identifies what is insufficient evidence. So you really need to pay attention to that because we may be really wanting more than what you think we want. So use those evidence guidance documents. They're very, very helpful. And in fact, that IIA page has just a plethora of resources for you. So really use it. So let's go ahead to criterion 1. Okay.
Michelle, real quick, for criteria 10 through 12, even though we are not making a determination on whether or not those eligibility requirements are in fact met, we are going to work with you to the point where we think that there should not be really any questions about the information you've provided. It's not that we just kind of pull out some information, throw it in there, and just hope for the best. We are trying to put you into the best position that we possibly can before you get put in front of the commission. So just know that we still will be providing you feedback on those criteria as we are working with you throughout this process.
And I think we may not have actually said this outright, but you will, one of us here in the IIA division group will actually be working with you. Although there is an email address that you can send that goes to all of us, you will actually have a specifically assigned consultant so that you can ask questions, and it is that consultant that will be mediating that iterative process that Hart spoke about earlier, as far as making sure your submissions, not just in stage 2, but all the way through, are aligned or meet their criteria and expectation of the commission or the committee. Criterion 1. So this is where we ask you to show us that you have a solid and comprehensive organizational structure related to your proposed program with positions that are dedicated to building and supporting the program. So you'll need to identify the division in which the program resides, the position responsible for the ongoing oversight of the program. So you'll need to identify a unit head. So who does the program head report to? And then the program head is the person or position directly responsible for coordinating the function and day-to-day work of the program. One of the things you'll find as we go through this process today is that the institution is expected to be very much involved in the creation and running of the program. So rather than just being a division or a department that does its own thing, the institution definitely needs to be involved. This criteria also asks for assurances from the unit head that these positions will stay in-house and that they will stay trained and up to date on the information. As Cheryl alluded to a little bit earlier, sometimes things change. And although I believe we're very good at identifying and giving information about the changes, programs and institutions are also responsible for staying up to date. So, and something to note here that, and I'll probably say this a few times, the contact information for particularly the point person needs to stay updated. As again, Hart said earlier, this process can take up to 5 years. Things change in those 5 years. So we need to make sure that we know who to contact. So contact information does need to stay updated. Okay, criterion 2, lawful practices. So this one is just exactly as it reads. We need to know that you have non-discrimination policies in place. The confusion that often happens here is that we need to know that you have policies in place both for the institution and the program. So two different ones. The policy for the greater institution covers employees of the institution, but doesn't cover candidates because they are not employees of that institution. So we need to know that the program itself also has non-discrimination policies. Any questions on that? That's where this one can be a little confusing. Okay. Go ahead to 3, here we go. So the components of this criteria are related to the ongoing accreditation system, about data reporting, the stage 5 site visit, and general compliance. So here we ask for several assurances, which as I said earlier, are sort of official documents from someone in a leadership position that these things will take place or are taking place. And those assurances should mirror the language of this criterion. We want to know that your leadership is aware of and agrees to everything in the criterion. And even if one component of A through E is missing, we'll actually ask that you rewrite it and resubmit it. So it really should just mirror the language here. Okay, 4. Requests for data. This criterion asks the institution to identify the name and title of the person responsible for reporting and responding to the commission with all the necessary information and data. It's typically the person who is also responsible for the day-to-day functioning of the program, but that may or may not be the case. Again, each program is unique, but we just need to know who the point person is and who is responsible for making sure that that data is collected. Okay.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question before we move on?
Sure.
It was regarding criteria 3. Do all of those assurances need to be board approved, or just the initial board approval of wanting to be going through this process suffices?
So you need to have that board approval that they are aware and agree to starting and sustaining and maintaining the program. These assurances will come from someone, perhaps a superintendent, someone in a higher level position that is in a position to actually make these assurances with all the preconditions. So it doesn't have to be board approved unless for some reason someone in your leadership says they should be, but typically it will come from a superintendent, an assistant sup, for LEAs, and directors or deans from IHEs.
Yeah, this will be the unit head who will be providing these assurances. So like she mentioned, yeah, for a district or county office, that'll be the superintendent. For a charter school organization, might be the CEO or president or whomever is determined to be the unit head there. For an IHE, it'll likely be the dean of the School of Education.
Copy, thank you.
Or wherever your program tends to reside.
It will not be a program director, though. A program
Correct.
director will not be the person who is providing the assurances.
Okay. The grievance process. So this criterion asks for two things. One is evidence of a grievance process for candidates in the proposed program. And this will be a separate policy from the institution itself, again, because candidates are not employees of the institutions. They're not covered by any institutional policies. So there needs to be a grievance process for candidates, and an affirmation or the process itself that the program ensures that candidates are informed of the grievance process and how the candidate will be informed. So assurance that they will be, and then showing how or describing how. And again, because you don't have candidates, this is what your intent is. So will you be informing them at the orientation? And can that process be found in your candidate handbook? Okay. So you'll note that a number of these eligibility requirements ask for policies and procedures for the current existing candidates. So like I was saying, it's just what is your intent, and know that there's knowledge and expectation that some of these will shift a little bit through the IIA process as you work out the kinks. So at this stage, it's what do you think you intend, or how do you think you'll be able to do it? Again, we just want to make sure that you are thinking through that process.
I have a follow-up question on that one. Are there any like ideal template documents for something of that nature? Because I'm sure that there's going to be things in relation to a grievance process that if we haven't yet started the process, we don't even know could potentially be a grievance later. So I don't know if there's some like, here are sort of major points that should be included, or some common best practices to such a process. Sort of like the UCP on the other side is very specific for the CDE and gives guidance and things of that nature.
No,
So-
we do. Oh, sorry, Michelle.
No,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
There isn't a template that we specifically have. However, what I would recommend for you to do is to go back through some of the institutions who have gone through this process and look at their submissions, and maybe take a few points from their submissions and incorporate them, because obviously they were good enough to get through the process.
Okay. And communication and information. We sort of talked about this a little bit earlier when we talked about the website. So this criterion asks how you'll be communicating information about your proposed program outside of your institution. So, and again, clearly everything is in draft form, and you'll be refining it through the IIA process. And you, as Hart said, you will eventually need a functioning website for posting your evidence and narratives for all of the stages of IIA. So it is a recommendation that you start it now, even if it is just in outline form. If you have one started in those documents, you'll send a link. And if you don't currently have a website, so what a number of institutions have done is just created a page on their currently existing website. And again, right now, a shell of a website is fine. Believe me, it will get filled in. And as you are thinking of organizing the website, think of it from the audience who will be using it. So organizationally, it should be easy for someone who is not within your program to navigate. So as you're putting it together, think about it from that perspective. And again, your IA consultant will help you with that and can provide some suggestions. Now, this criterion also asks for more of those policies and procedures that you'll be using, as I mentioned in criteria 5. So ERs, as I said, combination of assurances and narratives and evidence. Quick, there we go. No questions on 6. Okay, student records, management, access, and security. So this criterion is pretty direct. Students have a right to access their documentation while they are in the program and after they have completed it. So those records need to be available and have an identified access process for the candidates. They also need to be locked in a very specific way, and that's actually identified in the criterion. So the responsibility of both access and maintenance of the document rests with the program. So we want to know what process you will use, because we have seen instances of unsecured records. So it needs to be locked up because you'll find there are some personal information in there. So like, just read this directly as it is. This is probably one of our most straightforward criterion, but the records do need to be secured. Questions on 7? Okay. 8, also very straightforward. It asks you to identify and describe your proposed delivery model. So will you be online, in-person, hybrid, locations, and talk about outside help in a minute. So as you think about how you want to provide the information for your candidates, will it be, and I think the whole COVID experience has changed people's view on how this might be. So how is it, you might have some stuff online, but most of it is in person. So you would identify that as in person. So kind of think about what combinations of delivery models that you will use and what outside help you have. We have one organization here who's working with a consultant. So who are you having help? Okay, that's completely bad grammar, what I'm about to say. Who are you using to help you design the program to a fairly deep level? If it's just someone who's going to come in and do one PD once a month or less, those aren't people we necessarily need to know about. We want to know about those people who are helping the structure and core of the program. Okay, 9, let me pull up on mine. So veracity in all claims and documents submitted. So this criterion asks for a letter of affirmation from institutional leadership, not program leadership, but institutional leadership, acknowledging the accuracy and integrity of the information you are submitting. Again, I want to emphasize that the institution needs to be involved with the development and information related to the program, not just the program itself. It really isn't a standalone department in the institution. It needs to be a collaborative effort. So this letter must be signed and use the language in the criterion. So remember that the institution, the LEA or IHE, is the identified program sponsor and is both responsible and liable for whatever happens in the proposed program. So we want to make sure that leadership is aware of everything. And that's why we want them involved.
As Michelle mentioned, again, please just mirror the language on this. This is not an opportunity to show off your creative writing skills or anything like that. I've had to return letters because on the end of it, it said, evidence of a lack of veracity is cause for denial of initial institutional accreditation rather than approval. These are things that will get the letter sent back. So just make sure that you are just mirroring that language.
Okay. So now we're starting with those criteria that we will summarize for the commission, but we will make sure that they are in appropriate enough condition that we believe they will be aligned. So mission and vision. So a complete program design with significant detail included is not what's intended here. This is the note that's actually on the criterion itself. The intent is to provide the commission with sufficient information to ensure that the institution's philosophy and approach about educator preparation is consistent with California's regulations and rules. So this mission and vision is what is your perspective for why you are doing this program? Now, granted, there's a need in your area, but rather than just starting a program, what's your foundation for why you're doing it and your perspective for how you're coming about it? So it asks for information in 6 different areas that show you've given deep and academic thought to your approach for offering the proposed program. And even further along in the IAA process, it will ask actually for your theoretical foundations. So where are you coming from for how you were designing your program? Now, institutions from outside of California, of which we have one here, need to provide some additional information, and that information is identified on the eligibility requirements themselves. And the mission and vision can have some information that is shared with the overall institution, but this is asking for the mission and vision of the program, not the institution itself. Questions here? Okay, and 11. So criterion 11 asks that you tell us about your previous participation in an educator preparation program. So Campbellsville, you talked about that when you were when it was, what was it, Phillips? There was a PPS. So you might discuss that and historically what happened there and why you're wanting to reinstate it. LEAs, you might talk about being involved with the induction program of your teachers and why you want to then become and have an induction program yourself. So what has been your experience with the educator preparation program that you are proposing? The CTC staff will research the other institutions that you talk about, make sure that they are relevant and have approval. Again, here, institutions outside of California need to provide some additional information that is identified also, again, on the eligibility requirements document. Again, this is something that your IIA consultant will help you, and you might need to have a conversation with them about, well, what do you mean the history or prior experience? So that may help to have the consultant be a bit of a sounding board on this one, at least as I've found. And criterion 11. So for the ongoing IIA process, you will need to establish a third access for third-party comments. So all of this is transparent. It will be public documentation. So you will create, and we'll help you do that. This happens, I think, after stage 3. Is that correct, Hart? Nope. Okay. So you'll be providing access for third-party people to comment on your proposed program or your institution itself. And this will come before the commission as well. Hart?
This will be after you conclude in stage 2, we will send you this language and you just put it up on your website and it just says literally this on it. It just provides anyone an opportunity to either sing your institution's praises, or if they've got some sort of grief or grudge to let us know that as well. But as it is, we don't, this inbox doesn't really get a whole lot of action, but it just needs to be up there to provide anyone who might have any sort of opinion an opportunity to express it.
And then capacity and resources. So this criterion asks that you show us how the institution will sustain the proposed program. So it includes, but is not necessarily limited to, facilities, staffing, technology, financial and material resources. Once you've been approved, will this be able to continue on? An important piece is the teach out plan, which means that should the program be unable to continue or the institution is unable to support the proposed program, the teach out program needs to be fully fleshed out, which means what will happen to those candidates? How will you transition them to other programs? Are you partnering with another program? If candidates are in their last year, and will they transition to first year candidates to other programs? So what happens if for some reason you are not able to continue the program? Okay. And again, we know and hope that this won't happen, but it does need to be something that a plan is created for. Again, institutions from outside California need to provide some additional information, which is identified on the ER documents. Questions on capacity and resources? Okay, so here is a screenshot of the IIA webpage. As you can see, it actually has links for each individual IIA stage. Strongly recommend that you bookmark this in your browser bar. All the information that you need, documentation, forms, etc., are here by stage. So the resources that you'll have available are that IIA email access, this page, your IIA consultant, everything that you need.
I had a follow-up question. You referenced early how the stages, the timeline for those stages vary depending on the type of program you're trying to be and so forth. Other than that, are there specific due dates that we should just be aware of, or is it just really, an organic pace?
There's no specific due dates on any of these submissions. However, something to keep in mind regarding your submissions is it really all depends on when things are determined to be aligned by reviewers or us, and understand that us putting together agenda items for either the commission or the Committee on Accreditation takes time. And then there's an internal review process here. And then we also have to post agenda items a specific amount of dates prior to the meeting. And so if for some reason everything is determined to be aligned to the standard, say like the common standards and preconditions in stage 3, for instance, and this happens 3 weeks out from a meeting, it's likely not going to make it onto that agenda and will fall to the next commission meeting. So those are things that you have to keep in mind. Some of it is luck, and some of it is just, bad luck in terms of because we are relying on volunteers here. This isn't these reviewers outside of ourselves. This is not their full-time job. They are doing this out of the kindness of their heart, and when they have an opportunity to review these things. So that's just something to consider as you're moving through this process.
Hart, if I could just say something. I don't want these poor folks to, not that I'm going to disagree with you in any way, but I just want to say that Hart and Michelle, and also Poonam, who you aren't meeting today because she's on vacation, they do a really good job of staying on top of these volunteers and kind of reminding them and asking how things are going. And there is only so much that they can do, and these folks are professional educators like yourselves. But they really do. They stay on top of these folks and try to give them a little nudge because they know how important this is for you all.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't mean to give the impression that we were sitting back in lawn chairs with.
No. It was just the whole bad luck thing. And I was like, well.
Oh, well, no, I was just talking about in terms of when things happen to be aligned,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Sorry.
And one of the things that we do is backwards map from the commission or the committee meeting. And because really the only deadlines that are here are the deadlines for these meetings. So because we're aware of the process, we can say, all right, we can aim, if we're aiming for the August commission meeting, we know we have to have our end done for the agenda item on this day. So let's see if we can backwards map the reviewers in this time frame. And I think that's where the luck comes in, is if those all line up. But we're actually pretty good at sort of doing that backwards mapping and truly creating some realistic expectations for you about when your submission may be complete. It's just, we also ask for a little bit of leeway because there are a lot of people involved in this process, which can be what throws it off a bit. Amanda?
Thanks. So I just wanted to clarify, because when we're talking about the reviewers, we're talking about stage 3, correct? Or because I'm looking at your document and stage 2 is reviewed, stage 1 and 2 are reviewed internally by staff. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. But so let's, as Hart said, stage 1 for some of you will be done in a couple of hours. But because stage 2 is more evidence heavy and narrative, it really all depends on how it's written. So even though it's reviewed internally, there is still that iterative process between the institution or the program and the IIA consultant to get everything aligned to the ERs. And that's the unknown bit, how long that will take. A lot of it depends on who's doing the original writing, their understanding of what we're asking for. So yes, 2 is reviewed internally, but it's still.
Okay, and another thing to consider is that all of us are working with multiple institutions at the same time. So we might be working on multiple agenda items while also reviewing eligibility requirements. Out of today, there are 4 institutions here. So one of us will end up with 2 institutions that in stage 2 at the same time. And then we're reviewing them based upon who submitted first and then getting that feedback out. So it's really, a lot of this is where things are just falling in time. And it just depends, really on workload, because we are working with multiple institutions, but we are also doing site visits and stuff like that with other institutions that are fully approved at this point. So it just really depends on that.
Yeah, I would just jump in there real quick and say, yes. I mean, do we wish that we had more staff and staff we could dedicate just to IIA? We 100% do. And I know that you all understand what that's like in staffing your own programs. So yeah, Hart, Michelle, and Poonam, they do this. This is a majority of their work, but they also have regular site visits, at least 3 apiece each year that they do with institutions that are already in the full 7-year cycle. And then of course that quote unquote other duties as a sign that we all enjoy so much.
But stage 3 and 4 are reviewed by reviewers outside of the CTC. Is that your question? Part of your question?
No, I apologize if I'm making it sound like I don't think you guys are doing amazing. The work that we've already had with you guys has been fabulous. I'm trying to get a sense of like for example, we submitted our stage 2 materials at the end of June, and you guys were great, and you right away got back to me and said, well, we'll hear from you in 6 weeks, or hear from us in 6 weeks, and that's fine. That's absolutely wonderful. But like, I guess my question is, that feedback, that iterative process, does that look like little bits at a time, all at once, back and forth? Like what? Just like what's even the format going to look like? I guess is my question.
So you will submit your 12 eligibility requirements. Those will all be reviewed, and you will receive comprehensive feedback on all 12 of those criteria at once. It's not going to be a piecemeal process, and then you will address any of the concerns there. It'll come back, and then maybe we'll determine that, wow, this is looking pretty good. We'll put together the agenda item at that point. But then it still goes to the internal review process, and then Aaron and Cheryl will give it a look, and then they'll have questions. And so sometimes at the end of this process, as we're moving towards the commission meeting, it gets really intense, and we will be requesting information because we have to hit these specific deadlines. And so just understand that it'll be intense on both sides of this, on the institutional side and on our side, trying to make sure that you are put in the best position going in front of the commission. But there's always just a kind of mad scramble at the end to make sure that we are just plugging up any sort of potential holes we see in the ship.
But know that still, even though at the end, yes, it will be comprehensive, you can ask questions as you are developing your responses. So if you have a question about a particular criterion or a standard or a precondition, it's not that you only send us everything when you're done. You are more than welcome to ask us questions along the way about some pieces. But I think what Hart might be saying is that you don't want to, what we would prefer you not do is answer criterion 1, send it to us, is this okay? Criterion 2, send it to us, is this okay? We're there as consulting along the way, and then when we and you feel like everything is ready, then okay, we'll look at it truly from the alignment perspective, or whatever perspective it needs to be looked at as a whole. But there is some, we're willing to consult with you along the way as well. Okay, so the decision point for stage 2 is also eligibility to move forward or denial of eligibility. So once it's complete, once your submission is complete, we feel it's complete, we'll do our thing on our side, create the item agenda. And again, as Hart said, we won't bring it forward until we're pretty darn sure that it will be okay with the commission. And if your institution is deemed eligible to move to stage 3, the commission may still request some additional information about specific topics, but that you would then include in your stage 3 submission. You wouldn't need to go back and redo stage 2. If your institution is denied eligibility, which again, we will work with you for that not to happen, but if for some reason it is denied eligibility to move forward, the commission will provide their rationale for the denial. And then if you choose, you can revise your documents and resubmit. Okay, so even if you're denied eligibility doesn't mean it's all over and done. It just means that we need some revisions. Okay.
Now, something to keep in mind as we move forward into stage 3 is that we try to anticipate the sorts of questions the commission may ask. However, sometimes they have a mind of their own, and they might be asking questions that should be addressed in later stages. And so they might start asking you about the program design, but you haven't really considered that as much as you will when you start addressing the program standards in stage 4. So it's just something to be aware of, that we try to have them focus their questions on the stage at hand, but sometimes we can't anticipate where their questions go to. So just to sort of have a general sense about that, and then say, well, we've given it a little bit of consideration, but we really look forward to addressing that in stage 4 when we address that in our program standards. It's just something to keep in mind, that we will try to keep them in the relevant stage, but sometimes there will be questions outside of it. And it's not that there's any sort of maliciousness behind that or anything like that. It's just they're curious folks who want to know about the program you're going to be ultimately offering to candidates. So I think we'll move through stage 3 and then maybe take a little 5-10 minute break, if that is okay with everyone, if you can push on for a few more minutes. So in stage 3, after you've been determined to be eligible by the commission, you will be submitting both responses to the preconditions, and so that will be the initial program preconditions, general precondition number 9, and that's only going to be for IHEs, and then whatever program specific preconditions that you're proposing to offer. The reason you're only providing a response to general precondition number 9 for the IHEs is because the eligibility requirements that you addressed in stage 2 very closely resemble these general preconditions. And these preconditions are either in statute, regulation, or their commission policy, and they're really all about institutional and program compliance. And then the common standards really just deal with institutional infrastructure and support for your proposed programs. And these will be reviewed by, well, the preconditions will be reviewed by staff. Generally, what we do is we have program-specific consultants here. So for instance, if you are going to be offering a multiple subject program or a single subject program, we have consultants that that is really their field of expertise. And so that's who that will be reviewed by. Obviously, it is an iterative process, like we've mentioned with most things in IIA. But your common standards will be reviewed by some of our most knowledgeable experts. They are BIR members. So these are people who have done program review, they've done common standards review, and they've done a site visit. So they have a wealth of knowledge. They know the process very well, and they understand that this is a prospective program and not one that is currently in operation. The common standards submission, whatever you do, please note, do not follow the common standards guidance document. That is for fully approved institutions. You will be doing a standard by standard narrative response with evidence. And as I mentioned, these preconditions, they all have to do with program and institutional compliance. And then, yes, they're based on state laws or commission policy. And Aaron, is this? Yeah, Aaron, I'm going to turn it on over to you to speak a little bit more about the common standards.
Happy to. All right. So we have talked about quite a few things today, and we will talk about quite a few more, but I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you about the Commission's common standards. So just, again, to refresh, the Commission has kind of 3 adopted sets of either standards or requirements that all institutions have to be aligned to, basically at all points during the accreditation cycle. So we do require this obviously of IIA institutions like yourselves, but institutions in our regular 7-year cycle also respond to the preconditions on a regular basis, the common standards, and the program standards on a regular basis. So we've talked a little bit about preconditions. And, those, as Michelle mentioned, are founded in statute or law. So there are very serious requirements that if you're out of alignment, if you're ever out of alignment, we need to get you back into alignment as quickly as possible. And then sort of in the level of hierarchy, the next down are the common standards. And then after that are the program standards that are specific to whatever type of program that you're going to offer. But these common standards, much like the preconditions, at least the general preconditions, common standards are a set of standards that all institutions must be in alignment with, regardless of the type of program you're offering, because the common standards are written at a level that is at the institutional or the unit level, as opposed to that specific program level. And when we talk about the unit, by the way, the unit, depending on the levels of hierarchy within your institution, the unit could be your institution, could be that high up. Sometimes at a 4-year institution, right? We've got the institution, let's say it's a CSU, then the unit is another level down. It tends to be the School of Education within that institution. And then the School of Education as a unit oversees all of the preparation programs offered, whether it's multiple, single, pupil personnel services, speech language, pathology. That unit will oversee all of those programs. So again, I'm talking at the unit, possibly the institutional level for you all, depending on your hierarchy. So for the common standards, we have 5 common standards, and each of them has a number of components. And as I said, they apply to all institutions. And the components within each of the 5 common standards are specifically focused on issues of quality within the unit and also within the programs, and issues of institutional infrastructure that would be common across all of the different types of educational preparation programs. Hart, if you'll go to the next slide. So I'm going to walk through each of these 5 and just do sort of a high level bulleted what's in each of them. You will notice that some of the common standards have more components than others. That is indeed the case. Common Standard 1 and 3 are the biggest common standards. Common Standard 1 deals really very specifically with institutional infrastructure and the support of the institution and the unit for all of the prep programs that it oversees. And then the next largest one, as we get to it, is Common Standard 3, which is clinical practice and field work. So that's an important component of all prep programs, so it makes sense. So in Common Standard 1, as I mentioned, this deals with infrastructure and support, not just for the unit, but for all of the programs that the unit oversees. And let me just, I guess, expound upon that a little bit. It is the Commission's expectation that however many programs your institution offers, each one of them is treated with the same level of oversight, the same level of providing resources, the same level of gathering information, data about each of those programs. So, and making decisions across all those programs. So we want to try to ensure that you don't have, one over here that's kind of the redheaded stepchild that doesn't get as much touch, maybe that doesn't get as much attention. If that's the case, it usually will come out as we're looking at program standards and common standards. But most specifically, in just going through these bullet points real quick, in Common Standard 1, you're going to be telling us about the research-based vision for your program. And again, as Hart and Michelle have already mentioned, these are going to be reviewed by peers in the field, individuals that work in and operate the same kinds of programs that you are operating or that you plan to operate. And so they are also experts, as you are, in current research and foundations for providing educator preparation. So we want you to tell us, what is your research-based vision for this? And you'll cite the research and discuss it a little bit. We want to know how, at the unit level or the institutional level, that you are actively involving your faculty, your personnel, and other stakeholders, internal and external, in the development, the design, and the evaluation of your program. And that's why, again, we require that you have like a partner as you're moving through this IIA process. We want to know that you're not developing this just within your own bubble of expertise, but that you're bringing in folks from the field and having a good collegial collaborative relationship with, hopefully at the very least, the institutions or the schools you hope to serve, or those that will be your feeder schools. So this will look like a number of things, advisory groups. It will also look like your faculty maybe being involved with some of the local schools as well as involved with your own institution. There are a variety of ways to talk about how you'll meet this component of the standard. Very similarly, we have a collaboration phrase within Common Standard 1, and that is specifically collaboration with other institutions like yourself, the feeder schools that you'll be working with, basically the broader educational community. Again, we want to make sure that you get involved with the educational community in California, and that you have some colleagues and some peers and some folks that you're collaborating with on the design and the operations of your program. Of course, we want to know that you have sufficient resources at the unit level that you're feeding into each of your programs to make sure that all of those programs are getting the support that they need, whether that's faculty, whether that's maybe computer labs, classroom space, those kinds of things. So we'll be looking at that. We want to know who your unit leadership authority is and what authority they have. So one of the things often that you will find yourselves providing to us is an org chart. And that org chart is going to basically show us what the leadership structure is in your program. So, you know, who's your president, CEO, dean, provost, whatever. And then as you move down to, you know, directors, program leaders, and faculty that have maybe some specific roles like site supervisor, coordination, or fieldwork coordinators, et cetera. Diversity and excellence obviously is a very important component of all programs, and these standards were written quite some time ago. So it's not as if this was put in, you know, in the last few years as these kinds of concerns, and this focus has really taken a forefront, I think, in American society. We want to know how your institution, how your unit is going to seek out diversity in your own faculty, in your own staff, how you are going to seek out diverse opportunities for your program candidates in their field placement settings, in the schools in which they work. We need to make sure that any candidate that you prepare is prepared to, if they so choose, leave your program after they get their credential and go work in another area in California. The commission is tasked with credentialing individuals that can take that portable credential and work anywhere in the state of California in any school setting. So whether it's Redding, whether it's Lake Tahoe, whether it's San Diego, Los Angeles, individuals need to be able to step into any of those types of school settings and be successful and bring a level of excellence in their educator preparation that, of course, helps their students achieve excellence as well. So we're really curious about diversity in your recruitment, not only with your own faculty and staff, but also with your candidates. We will ask about the qualifications of your faculty and your school personnel. So if you are a college or a university, we're going to be asking to see like vitae for your faculty, so that the reviewers can look at those vitae and know whether or not the courses that they're teaching, are they qualified to be teaching the courses that they're teaching? Are they qualified to be involved in educator preparation of the type that you're offering? If you're at a school, like an LEA, you don't have faculty, quote unquote, per se, but we'll be looking to know that the individuals, for instance, the mentors that you're pairing maybe with a new teacher, that they have the appropriate level of credential and a certain level of experience and have received some orientation to be providing that mentor support. So again, I know this is a lot. You will get some more specific instructions from Hart, Michelle, and Poonam about the kinds of evidence pieces that you'll be required to provide. And then finally, we just want to know about your credential recommendation process. What this means is, what does that process look like, and who is going to be the planned authorized person who will be recommending your candidates to the commission for their credentials when they finish the program? Where will that position sit within your overall structure? Who will be overseeing it, and what will be their process to make sure that candidates have met all of the commission's requirements before they're recommended for the credential? And we do want to know, of course, that that person lives within your institution. And I say that because, believe it or not, we've had situations in the past. It's been some time now, but situations in the past where a program has farmed out their credential recommendation process to somebody that they were basically very hands-off with, and we don't want that. It is okay if you bring in some outside folks to work with you, and maybe if you farm out pieces of your program, but you ultimately have to have control and oversight, and must take full responsibility for anybody who's involved in your program. Before I move on to Common Standard 2, because these will take a little while, does anybody have any questions about Common Standard 1? Okay. So Common Standard 2 is candidate recruitment and support. And again, well, not again, I guess I will say this. You will probably recognize that there is a little bit of oversight in some common standards as we move from standard to standard. That is indicative of the level of importance that the commission does place on certain of these things. So candidate recruitment and support, very, very important, right? You're going to bring individuals into these programs, and the commission wants to make sure that you are doing everything you can to ensure that your programs are providing candidates with an appropriate level of support and assistance so that they can be successful, if they're going to be successful. Obviously, you may have to counsel out some people over the course of your lifetime running these programs, but doing everything you can up front to help make them successful is the best thing that you can do. So we need to know that you have some very clear criteria that include multiple components about accepting candidates into your program. So I realize in some areas where we have shortage areas, like Cheryl mentioned, bilingual right now is a shortage area. Science has historically been a shortage area. In those kinds of areas, I know that it is probably tempting to just bring in anybody that wants to come in. But again, you want these folks to be successful. You will be reporting data to the commission that says this is how many people we enroll and this is how many actually complete. So of course you want to do what you can to ensure that the folks that you bring into your program can be successful in your program. So just create a sense of what is a successful candidate going to look like for us, and then you're going to iterate that for us so that can be evaluated by peers. We want to know that you are again with the diversity that you are purposely taking steps to recruit individuals from diverse backgrounds, diverse settings, diverse cultures, speaking diverse languages. I mean, diversity, especially in a state like California, where we're blessed with so much diversity, it looks like a lot of things. But we also know that the profession is predominantly Caucasian women. So we want to know, what are you doing? And maybe in your EdJoin job search or your candidate recruitment to really indicate that you're looking for candidates that can help diversify the pool. And in diversifying the teacher pool, create situations where you are providing teachers in classrooms that look like their students, right? Amanda.
Do you anticipate, just given some of the murmurs in the legislature, that this language will evolve even to be even more, even stronger emphasis on this particular point?
I can't say for sure, only because I'm staff. And the commissioners really kind of run the show on this. It is a conversation. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a conversation that the commissioners are engaging in on a pretty regular basis at every meeting right now. And so, as things take shape, it's possible. They have the authority at any point to say, we want to open up our common standards. We want to make some changes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But that said, I just want to reassure everyone, when you get rolling on these standards, if we ever change standards, we give programs a chance to get up and running with new standards. It isn't, these are adopted, everybody better change starting tomorrow. So you guys are in process in IIA, and we're super sensitive to the fact that you're just trying to get rolling with this. If standards start to change, you will have ample opportunity to update your submissions if that's what's required of you. Sometimes we just let people get through the process, right? And then you can update after you become operational. But don't worry that, if something happens, you're suddenly going to find yourselves back at square one. That's not what we want for any of you. And along with the diversity, by the way, diversifying the educator pool, we want also to know that programs are supporting their candidates to recognize diversity in their students and to be open to that and to be able to address that within their student population. So it's more than just bringing in diverse candidates. It's how are your candidates going to, how are they going to respond to and support the diversity in the students that they'll be teaching. We need to know that how you are going to provide information to your personnel for guiding candidates. This often looks like, for instance, orientation for your staff, handbooks for the students in your programs, handbooks for your site supervisors, handbooks that are necessary maybe for your faculty that talk about your program. So these are often kind of guidance documents, but they are often for just about everybody who has sort of a role with your candidates, including your candidates themselves. And then, of course, we want to know how you are going to identify and then provide support to candidates who need additional assistance, and what maybe that support might look like. You may not get as far in your initial stage here as what that support might look like. I think at a broad sense you can, but what are you going to be looking at? Are you going to be looking at grades? Are you going to be looking at student surveys of courses? Are you going to be looking at their success on certain examinations? And then once you identify somebody who needs some help, how are you going to then seek that person out and provide them with the support and assistance that they need? All right. Common Standard 3, as I mentioned, it's a big standard, just like Common Standard 1. I think each of them has 9 components, so those are fairly large standards. But Common Standard 3 deals with coursework, fieldwork, and clinical practice. So this is a big standard. This is an important component of any program, whether it's an intern program, a residency model, an integrated, maybe bachelor's degree plus teacher prep, or your sort of standard, straightforward post-baccalaureate student teaching model. The way your coursework is organized and the way your fieldwork and clinical practice is offered to your candidates is very important to the commission. So I will say again here, you will see component number 1 is that the design of your program and the clinical experiences that your candidates receive are going to provide them with opportunities to experience issues of diversity. So that content will be covered in your preparation and your coursework, and then candidates are going to have an opportunity to have those experiences with diverse student populations in their clinical practice or their field work. We want to know that your site-based supervisors hold the appropriate, by certified, we mean that they hold the appropriate education or credential level for the individuals that they are going to be supervising. So are they going to be supervising multiple subject candidates, single subject candidates, pupil personnel services candidates? We want to know that the individuals who are on site in your candidates' clinical practice or fieldwork settings have the knowledge of education and the commission standards in the state of California, and hold a similar credential type and have experience doing the kind of work they're going to be supervising your candidate in. Obviously, that ensures that your candidates will have the best mentoring experience when they're in those clinical practice settings. We want to know that your site-based supervisors are being specifically selected. So they need to be certified and experienced. You need to show us that what your process is for identifying those people. Are you going to seek them out at your feeder institutions? Are you going to have your candidates select one? If you are going to say, we'll let our candidates select their own mentor, I will tell you, you still need to have a process for final vetting of that person. It won't be acceptable to say candidates select whomever and we let them go with that. You need to have some interaction with whoever that mentor, that site-based supervisor is. You need to do a final vetting of that person to make sure they're qualified. And then that next component is that you need to make sure that anybody who is a site-based supervisor has some training that you are providing in some way or that you're facilitating in their supervisory responsibilities, that you are orienting them to their role, that they have a clear understanding of what it means to be a site-based supervisor, what you're going to expect of them, and what they should be expected to be able to accomplish with their candidate. And they need to be evaluated. So often that'll look like candidate surveys about their mentor experience with their mentor, and then maybe you're gathering that survey data. That's just an example, but it's a typical example. So how are they being evaluated on a regular basis, and in a systematic way, meaning that they're all being kind of evaluated in the same way, so that if you want to look for trends across, let's say, how you're orienting your mentors, those trends are easy to see because everybody's being evaluated on the same components and in the same way, maybe at the same time across the program. We want to know that you are implementing and evaluating your field work and your clinical practice effectively. And that is going to look like potentially telling us how you are. The effectiveness of it is going to be based on your ability to evaluate it in a lot of cases. So how are you choosing clinical practice settings? What is your relationship with the schools where you're placing your candidates? How collaborative is it? And it needs to be collaborative. What's the feedback loop? Are you open to getting feedback from your feeder schools, where you're placing your candidates, and are they open to getting feedback from you? So it's there are a lot of components to what looks like effective fieldwork and clinical practice. I won't belabor it. Again, you all are, education experts in your field. You probably have a good sense of what this is going to look like. But it is important that we know that you're really being very thoughtful about the fieldwork and clinical practice experiences that your candidates have, because it's so important. And then that you are choosing school settings for this clinical practice and field work that align with state adopted content standards. So basically, are your candidates learning to teach California adopted curriculum and content in the classrooms that they're in? Because again, they could take this credential after they go through your wonderful programs and they could go to another place in the state and teach, and they need to be able to go offer their expertise in teaching at any setting in the state of California. And then again, that these clinical practice and fieldwork settings reflect the diversity of the state of California. Are there any questions about Common Standard 3? Okay. Common Standards 4 and 5 are a little bit similar. I'll just say that in advance. At least I think they are. You all may have a different perception of that, and feel free to jump in. Always interested to hear what people in the field think about our standards. But Common Standard 4 is about continuous improvement within your programs and within your unit. So, I mean, just the sort of the gist of Common Standard 4 is, how is your unit regularly gathering data about your program and the effectiveness of your program or programs? How is it evaluating that data? Like, what is the cycle? So let's say you say, well, we gather these 4 components of data every semester, and then our advisory board comes together and we evaluate that data. decision points are made for areas that can be improved. We take steps to enact those decisions, and then we come full cycle again at some point and we gather data about those same decisions, and we look to see if those decisions were effective, and if not, you start the cycle all over again. So it really is, it's a cyclical, somewhere on our one of our web pages that you may see, you'll sort of see this cycle. And it looks a lot like, oh, I'm going to get it wrong because it just went out of my brain. Looks a lot like what teachers learn to do, which is teach, assess, reflect, refine. It's that same thing. We want you to be doing that same thing within your programs so that you can identify areas for improvement before the commission steps in with a site visit and we find things, so that you have a regular opportunity to modify your programs as needed. I think I covered all of that without actually speaking the bullet points to you. And then Common Standard 5 program impact. Now, you all are newer to the commission, but I will tell you that this program impact Common Standard is newer to us. And when I say newer, I mean, we updated our Common Standards about 6 years ago. And that's when this Common Standard was added. And it was added based on some requirements that were happening at a national level through what was then NCATE, and it's now CAPE. They had this program impact standard, and the commissioners were really, really interested in this. And it was difficult. It was difficult to carve out the language for this standard because at the time that it was being discussed, there were a lot of concerns about what was then being called value added. And in California, we specifically cannot use value added data to evaluate teachers. And so we had to be very careful to ask for programs. I want to say this differently. We had to be very careful that we left it open for programs to identify whatever data makes the most sense for you and works best for you, but still is able to demonstrate how your educator candidates are having a positive impact on student growth and learning, and how you are having a positive impact then as the unit on student growth and learning. So it all still feeds back to you because it's a common standard. We do have, and this can be shared with you later, we have a really nice common standard webinar that we put together a couple of years ago where we have a consult. It was Poonam, as a matter of fact. So when you get to meet her, you'll be very pleased. You'll be very pleased to work with her. But we tasked Poonam early on when she came to work with us of going through Common Standard 5 submissions from our 7-year, cohort institutions and looking at what was being submitted and what was the response from reviewers, and then pulling out those pieces of evidence that that institutions were submitting that reviewers were finding particularly useful in programs demonstrating their impact in these areas. And so there are some slides available on our website where Poonam presented some things and said, here are some things that we're finding that reviewers and the commission and the committee on accreditation are finding exceptionally good or particularly good pieces of evidence for Common Standard 5. So if you have some questions about that, I think we have some resources that we can provide you that'll help you just start your thinking, maybe get your juices flowing about what kinds of things that you probably already have that you think you can access for this common standard. All right. So, well, I've gotten ahead of myself. Okay. So the stage 3 decision point, as we've been going through this process, we'll cover this for you at each time. Once these common standards and preconditions have been reviewed by either staff or the Board of Institutional Reviewers, one of these wonderful consultants, Hart, Michelle, or Poonam, will put together a report that will go before the commission. You will have an opportunity to have some representation. If the commission has questions specifically for you about your institutions, we don't want our consultants trying to answer questions that really you hold the expertise to. So we do invite you to be there. If the commissioners have questions, you can help answer those. And then at stage 3, then after the commissioners review the report that consultants put together and have an opportunity maybe to ask questions of you. Hopefully they will grant provisional approval to you at that time, which will allow you to move on to stage 4, which is the stage in which then you will respond to your program standards, and you'll start to talk about what your program is going to look like. Or again, if they deny you at that point, you have an opportunity to kind of go back, regroup, take a look at what you provided, take into consideration anything the commission may have said, and reapply as necessary if that's what you choose.
Again, as I mentioned earlier, we will be thoroughly going through these submissions and then the feedback from reviewers. And when we are putting together the item, we try to put you in the best place that we can before going in front of the commission, especially with stage 3, considering that your common standards will be reviewed by one of our BIR members who are our experts that we defer to on the common standards. We think that you will be in a really good spot before you go before the commission on this. However, as I mentioned earlier, the commissioners, they're still curious about your program, that you haven't addressed the program standards yet and all that. So there still might be some questions about program design that just crop up. However, as I mentioned, we will try to keep them contained to the stage at hand here. So with that, before moving to stage 4, I think maybe we should take a little break. All right, it is 12:15, so I'm going to go ahead and get things going here. So after you have been granted provisional approval by the commission in stage 3, you will move on to stage 4 here. And so what is being determined by the commission is your provisional approval period, and they will determine whether or not it should be from anywhere from 2 to 4 years. This would allow, at minimum, one cohort of candidates to complete your program, and you'll be able to collect some data on them, and you will be able to kind of have a sense of where your program is at as you move towards the provisional site visit. As mentioned earlier, you will not be able to propose any new programs during this provisional period. And then at the conclusion of it, you will have that provisional site visit, which I mentioned. However, does this mean that you can begin offering your programs yet? No. This is a very exciting slide. You have been provisionally approved. However, you have not had any sort of program approval. It must still go through the initial program approval process, at the conclusion of which the Committee on Accreditation will either determine to grant or to approve your program or deny approval of your program. And I think I'm moving over to you, Aaron, for a couple of slides here. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I can... I'll take this one, and then you can take over for the program standards. So for the IPA process, it's just like the eligibility requirements, it's just like the preconditions, and it's just like the common standards. This will be an iterative process. You will submit a standard by standard response to each of your relevant program standards, and you will also submit a program summary, which kind of gives us a sort of holistic view of your program and provides a little bit of additional context that maybe your responses to your narrative responses don't necessarily give us. Also, you will be completing a program matrix, and on this, you will be showing where each candidate competency, so for instance, if this was multiple single subject, these would be the teaching performance expectations, where each candidate competency is introduced, practiced, or assessed in your proposed program. And I'm going to move on to the program standards here. And Erin, do you want to take this one over?
Yes, thank you. So as I mentioned when I was talking about the common standards, the program standards are sort of that next and really kind of final level of commission standards that you'll be addressing in this process. And the program standards, unlike the common standards, are about the specific program that you are going to hopefully be operating. So while we have one set of common standards that every institution responds to, program standards are specific to either multiple single, ed specialist, pupil personnel services, reading specialist. We have just over, I think, 40 sets of program standards for the various types of programs that you all as institutions may be hoping to offer either now or in the future. And they specifically then address some of the same issues that the common standards do, but rather than being at the unit level, they are specific to each program. So they're really, really, really at the program level. And I think that will become clear to you as you read them if you haven't already. And another similarity, I guess, is that these are reviewed by trained BIR reviewers. And with program review, we look for individuals who are operating or teaching in the same type of program that they'll be reviewing. So they have program expertise. So we're not going to ask a multiple subject reviewer to review your PPS program. We're going to find PPS reviewers, even though there aren't very many in the state of California. We've got some good ones, and we'll call on those folks. So you can always be assured that you're really getting an understanding group of folks that get what it is you're trying to do, that are reading your responses to program standards. So the commonalities, again, because there are 40 some different types, and this Accreditation 101 is still a bit of a generic presentation. We're not going to cover all the various program standards, but things that are common across most of the program standards are questions of curriculum. What type of curriculum are you going to be using within your program? And I will tell you that reviewers will notice if you're planning to use a curriculum that is particularly out of date. They really are good. They're experts in this field. We want to know that the coursework that you are offering is going to be linked for initial programs that have a set of teaching performance expectations. So multiple single and special ed right now, and also admin. We want to know that the coursework that you are offering is going to specifically offer candidates the opportunity to learn about each of those performance expectations or competencies, and have an opportunity to then practice that, and that you are going to then assess their competence on that. If you are doing a gen ed or an admin or a SPED program that's going to require a teaching performance expectation or the administrator performance expectation, it's not going to be good enough for you to say, well, the TPA or the APA is going to do the assessment part. We want to know that you're measuring, that you're assessing your candidates and providing them feedback before they get to a point where they're taking the performance assessment for whatever their credential is. Now, if you don't have a set of adopted competencies, we still want to know that your curriculum is up to date, and that the way that your course, the way that your program has been designed is sequential and scaffolded, so that candidates have opportunities to learn the basics and then move through things that are a little more complex as they get through their program, right? You don't want to teach them the most complex thing up front and explode their heads, and then they want to leave the program. You need to get them in there at the ground level and then build upon that as they go through, so everything continues to be logical to them up through the point of their own success in your program. Another thing that's common across most of the program standards is that you collect data on your candidate competency and your program effectiveness. So this goes back to Common Standard 4, where we say, at the unit level, you need to be gathering data about all of your programs and how effective they are, and making decisions based on that data analysis. The same thing is sort of occurring within the programs. And hopefully the data that your programs is gathering become data points that you then bring up to your unit level assessment, because again, you're responsible to make sure all those programs are successful, however many you offer in the future. Fieldwork and clinical practice. There is a fieldwork and clinical practice component in most all of our standards. And for those that don't have it yet, I will tell you that the field is talking about it. Having candidates, providing candidates with an opportunity to really practice in real life the things that they are learning, whether it's strategies or content in the programs is really, really critical. And so there is typically a fieldwork clinical practice component in most of our standards. There is a research/best practices component in most of our standards. Again, that goes back to sort of what I mentioned in curriculum. We want to know that you as a program are keeping up to date with the current research and the current topics in preparing educators or school leaders or school personnel, and the best practices that go along with that research. And then, of course, there are a lot of components within our program standards, especially our more newly adopted program standards around equity, inclusion, diversity, and that, you know, when we talk about diversity, we're talking about, a lot of times you'll see phrases in our standards that say all students. Educator prep candidates are prepared to meet the needs of all students, that they're prepared to evaluate how all students are doing and provide interventions to all students. When we say all students, we're talking about students regardless of language ability. Are they first or second language learners? Whatever their socioeconomic status is, you know, whatever race or ethnicity or gender or whatever that they identify with, we're talking about all students. And so you will see a lot of equity of access components, I think, really more than being explicit, often very much sprinkled throughout the program standards. Is this me? It is me. Sorry, everyone. We did move the slides around in Poonam's absence, so some of us are taking slides we're not used to. So this, at the end of stage 4, things are a little bit different, and Hart kind of mentioned this. Rather than going before the commission at the end of stage 4, you'll be going before the commission's designated committee on accreditation. And the committee on accreditation is very much made up of practitioners in the field. It is divided evenly between K-12 practitioners and individuals at higher ed. So it's got a really nice combined broad spectrum of individuals from the various preparation viewpoints in California and across the state. We try to make it regionally representative as well. And the consultant, whether again Hart, Michelle, or Poonam, will bring a report before the Committee on Accreditation that lets them know that your program standards have been reviewed by the Board of Institutional Reviewers and have been found to be acceptable, and will make a recommendation that the Committee on Accreditation grant you program approval, which will at this point allow you to start admitting candidates into your program and to take your program operational. And then, of course, as with all our other stages, if you're denied program approval, you can go back and reevaluate those areas that might have been of concern to the COA or to reviewers, and maybe make modifications and come back before the COA. And also, as with the stage 3 in front of the commission, you will be asked to or be invited to be present for the COA should they have any questions for you about your programs or about anything that that they see in the written report from staff.
All right, so now we are moving on to stage 5. You can finally start offering your program, which is very exciting.
I'm sorry,
Amanda has a question.
Stage 4 question.
Yeah.
So once you've completed stage 3, if you are applying for approval from multiple programs and you've submitted for multiple programs to your institute, do you have to go through stage 4 for all of your programs at the same time, or can you go through stage 4 for like, okay, I'm ready to go with my induction program, but I'm not yet ready to go with my intern program? could I do
Well,
those piecemeal?
Yeah, you can stagger approval through stage 4. However, I wouldn't recommend too much space in between each of these approvals. That's why we say that you can be provisionally approved from 2 to 4 years to kind of give you a little bit of space. Because what we don't want to have happen is have you running one program for 2 years, and then you're moving towards your site visit, and then you get another program approved, and then you don't have the necessary data collected. You don't have a cohort that has completed the program at that point. But yes, it can be staggered, but we don't recommend, like I said, too much space in between those approvals.
And if I can just add on to that a little bit without beating a dead horse, the maximum amount of time you can have to run a program is 4 years. We have to come and have what Hart's going to talk about, the provisional site visit within that 4-year window. So we honestly, if you came in after operating one of your programs for a couple of years and said you want to add another one, we might counsel you about that, about the pitfalls of potentially trying to bring another program in at a late stage. We don't want to keep you from doing what you want to do, but we do want to make sure you're successful. So staggering too many programs could cause harm at the provisional site visit stage. And what we really want is for you to be able to be approved as a full institution. And then all of this adding of programs does become much simpler, actually. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. And
Sure.
again, you can't be proposing any new programs during this point. You will have had to have indicated that these were potential programs that you want to offer on your application form. You can't just all of a sudden be saying, okay, well, we're offering a single subject program, and then you get approved and say, well, we kind of want to offer a bilingual program now too. Like that, you'll have to wait for full approval. Once you're fully approved, you can run the gamut and propose as many programs as you would like, and however many programs your institution can sustain. Granted, they still have to go through the initial program review process at that point and still get approved, but that will be up to you at that point. So as I mentioned, yes, in order to start running your program, you need to first receive provisional approval in stage 3 from the commission. Sorry, we are going over a lot of the same information just to kind of just hammer these points home. And then you need to receive that program approval from the Committee on Accreditation in stage 4. Again, you can be provisionally approved from 2 to 4 years, depending on the type of program and depending on how many programs. So for instance, if you're proposing an induction program, you'll likely be approved for 3 years because induction programs tend to be 2 years long. And so you'll have an entire cohort who will have completed the program, and you will be able to collect that data along the way. You will also be submitting annual data every year, and the unit head will be responsible for submitting that annual data every year, and then identifying any sort of program modifications. Generally, this will show up as we will go over in a little bit in your program review submission as you are heading towards the site visit. And so for the site visit, you will be resubmitting preconditions. You will have a program review submission. This is going to look a little bit different from what you did in stage 4, which was a standard by standards response. But luckily, you will have already completed that program summary and the matrix for your program. Unless you're induction, there's no matrix for induction. But if it's not induction, you will already have that matrix to go off of to show where those candidate competencies are already being addressed. And maybe you've moved some things around, but at least you will have that firm foundation to build upon as you are going to submit that program review. And then again, you will be submitting a common standards review again. And hopefully not too much has changed. Hopefully there's not too much additional work you need to do on this. However, if there were institutional or programmatic changes, they must be noted in those submissions.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
Cheryl mentioned earlier that we've been discussing here at the commission adding a few more touch points. We have not yet determined what those will be, so you're not going to see those in the slides today, but we will certainly let you know what those are. And those are not meant for us to meddle in your attempts to operate and get everything ready. But we had a situation this last year where an institution ended up at the provisional site visit having some findings that we recognize that if we had created a better line of communication for that program to the commission, we could have stopped them from making these changes because they actually put them out, the changes put them out of alignment with the standards. So we're trying to come up with, do we want to have an accreditation 201? That, after you get stage 4 approval, we say, hey, congratulations, and here are ways you can get in touch with us, just doing something along that lines. But for right now, without anything more official in print here in a slide for you, I would just say, once you get past stage 4 and you're getting ready to operate your program and you are operating your program, if you think that you're going to make a change to the program at that time, I would encourage you, please, to reach out to us. Just double check it with us, mostly so that we can just make sure that whatever that modification is doesn't put you out of alignment with the standards and somehow there's a finding on your provisional site visit. So hopefully we'll have something a little more for you by the time you get to that stage, but I want to plant that seed right now. We want to have open communication and collaboration with you about your program so that you always stay on the right side of the standards.
Excellent point. Yeah, as was mentioned at the top of this presentation, this is a fairly new process. We only recently had the first institution complete the whole process within the past year. It only went into place in 2016, so you see how long it takes some programs, and this was only one program that was being run. And so, yes, we are trying to iron out kinks and trying to make this as fluid of a process for the institutions as possible and try to be with you along the whole way through this process. And one thing I didn't mention for the provisional site visit is that a year leading up to the site visit, you will be assigned your own specific consultant. Yes, you will likely have worked with either myself, Michelle, or Poonam along the way, but you might be assigned a different one. It could be one of us, but it also might be a different one, but they will be dedicated to you. They will schedule monthly meetings with you to check out your progress, to answer any questions you may have about the submissions you need to provide. They will help you out figuring out your interview schedule, ensuring that all the stakeholder groups that need to be being interviewed are being interviewed, ensuring that you have sufficient numbers scheduled, and all that sort of stuff. And then we move to the site visit itself. So as I mentioned, this will basically be the site visit team will be the consultant, there will be a team lead, and then depending on the size and scope of your programs, there will be a couple program team members, or just one if there's one program. They will show up to your institution and they will conduct interviews with all the stakeholders. And basically what they are doing is confirming the information that you have provided to us in your preconditions, program standards responses, and common standards responses. At the end of this site visit, they will make a recommendation to the Committee on Accreditation at this point, or there will be a site visit report submitted to the Committee on Accreditation with a recommendation. The Committee on Accreditation will read that report. They will talk to the team lead, consultant, and then institutional representatives. And at the end of that, they will make a recommendation to the commission, ultimately for full approval. Now, there may be some stipulations that arose as a result of this site visit, saying that there are certain aspects of, for instance, a program standard that were not fully met. And based upon that, you need to address these certain aspects in the next year. Basically, what would happen is you would go before the commission at that point. They would also read their version of the report, and they could approve you, fully approve you along with those stipulations, but you will be remanded back down to the COA. And basically the COA will just ensure that those stipulations are being addressed in the subsequent year. Or their other decision point would be to deny full approval. Hopefully we don't make it all the way to the end of these 5 years and then to have your institution be denied approval. We think with the process in place and with the benchmarks you need to meet across the way, that you should be in a pretty good position to be fully approved. However, maybe there will be a couple of stipulations you need to address and have the COA look over. but ultimately you will move into a color cohort and you will be a part of the full accreditation cycle at that point. And so again, just to really hammer home how long of a process this could be, here's the sort of time frame and what things might affect that time frame. Obviously, how quickly you are able to submit, how quickly you are able to resubmit based upon that feedback. A lot of this will have to do with the availability of BIR members who, as we mentioned earlier, well, Aaron mentioned it, PPS, for instance. There isn't a plethora of PPS reviewers, so sometimes we need to wait a little bit of extra time until we have availability from those reviewers. For induction or some of like the general education credential areas, there might be more, so it might be quicker to identify those team members. However, with this iterative process, it depends on if they have availability right once you resubmit. It might be the middle of finals for them, and they have to take a little bit of extra time before they can get to your resubmission. It really depends. And then, as I mentioned earlier, also where this falls in relation to the commission and Committee on Accreditation meeting dates. And then we have payment and cost recovery fees, which we will go into a little bit, but you'll see in just a little bit. All right, and so the expectations and responsibilities of the unit head. So the unit head is really just ultimately responsible for any of the program and future programs that your institution intends to offer, and really they're kind of involved in the oversight of all the ed prep programs your institution is going to offer. Also, the unit head will have supervisory and budgetary authority over the unit itself, and has the authority to manage the human and fiscal resources needed to meet all of the educator preparation program goals. And then one final thing for the unit head is that they are also responsible for submitting all of the annual data to us on time. And then as far as the expectations and responsibilities for the institution and programs themselves is really just to meet all of the timelines once you are fully in the accreditation cycle. So what does that look like? This is a very exciting slide that takes a lot of clicks to get through. Okay, so you will see, and we'll just briefly go over this because this is 5 years out to even start considering this really at this point, but this is what a fully approved institution has to go through. You will see in years 1 and 4, you will be submitting those program preconditions and general preconditions. In year 5, you will be submitting a program review submission and a common standards submission. In year 6, you will host a focus site visit. This will be likely, well, it depends. It might be the same size as the team that showed up for your provisional visit. However, it might be a little bit bigger depending on if you have added on additional programs or not. And then that year 7, if there is any follow-up. So if there were any stipulations at your focus site visit, year 7 would be your follow-up year to address those stipulations. And you might have to host a revisit depending on the nature of the stipulations.
Can I just clarify before you jump off this? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
This is for once you're approved into the 7-year cycle. So this is what every institution that offers programs in the state of California, they're assigned. We have 7 different color cohorts. There's anywhere from 30 to 34 institutions in each of those cohorts. And we do those site visits on a rotating 7-year basis, but every institution has some touch point throughout the 7-year cycle of some kind.
And that once the 7-year cycle is over, it starts again.
It starts again, yeah.
And so this is what it looks like. So for instance, if you were the green cohort, you can see that there is annual data that is due on August 15th of every single year. But then you'll see in years 1 and 4, there are preconditions. And then obviously it starts over again in year 1. And then year 5, program review common standards. So it's just, you can find this accreditation map on our schedule and activities page on the commission's website there. However, like I said, I wouldn't get too bogged down in the details of this right now, since you have kind of your own mini accreditation cycle that you're going through here that can take up to 5 years. And by the time you get to this, you'll know exactly what you need to do once you're approaching full approval. And so now we're moving on to fees, and I will turn it on over to our master of coin, Aaron.
All right, fees. This is a complicated subject right now. So thanks for switching to the next slide, Hart. The most important thing I think that you will be pleased to know at the moment is that all fees for all of our accreditation activities were waived in this year's budget bill. This is the second year in a row that the governor and the legislature has chosen to waive any of our fees that we receive from programs and institutions. So currently you will not be billed for anything, but I will say that several years ago, a cost recovery fee, I'm going to say matrix because I can't think of the right word, was implemented within the budget bill and within the commission for us to kind of recover some of the costs for some of these activities, because even though the Board of Institutional Reviewers are volunteers, they do get not per diem, but they get reimbursement for participating in our site visits. We cover travel for our volunteers if they have to move around the state. We cover meals wherever we can, which isn't as often as I wish that it would be. So we were allowed to implement some fees for initial institutional approval, initial program approval, which is what you would engage in after you got all the way through stage 5 and you're a fully accredited institution. If you wanted to then add additional programs to your menu of offerings, you would go through initial program approval, that's IPR. And there's typically a fee associated with that. The site visits that we do on year 6 of the 7-year accreditation cycle, there are fees associated with that. And it's typically, those fees are assessed based on the number of programs and the number of candidates that you have in those programs. Again, if these fees go back into place, we will be releasing a large program sponsor alert, I'm sure, to remind everybody what those fees are and when they're due. There are late fees associated with failure to submit any required documentation or data on time. And then if you have to have a revisit, so in that 7th year, if your response to any stipulations goes beyond just submitting quarterly reports or 7th year report, and the committee decides that that you need a revisit in year 7, you would also have some fees associated with that. But again, those fees are all waived for this fiscal year. So as you get some of your submissions in, because you're hopefully starting the IAA process, right? This is just Accreditation 101. But if you get started on this process and get some of your submissions in this fiscal year, you will be grandfathered into, at least for IIA, future charges, as far as I know. But not charges for your site visit. Hart?
Okay, so you're saying that if they submitted obviously they submitted their eligibility requirements in this next school year, you're saying that there would be no program fee later on. So say fees are re-implemented after this year.
There could be, but it's that initial charge for IIA, that usually comes right up front. Yeah.
We're
not going to go backwards and charge people in the pipeline for fees that we couldn't assess at the time that you came through.
Right. Yeah, that initial institutional sort of fee.
Yeah.
But there could theoretically be a program fee later on in stage 4 if it falls. Say they institute the fees again for the next academic year, right?
There could be. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, because the legislature could reinstitute fees and then put restrictions on what kinds of fees. Sure. So I don't want to speculate about what could happen. We didn't expect these fees to get suspended for a second budget year, but they did. So I hate to ever try to predict what the governor and the legislature is going to want to do in the future.
Right. But for the IIA institutions here today, if you get your eligibility requirement submission in, once you submit it, you will not have to pay that initial institutional fee if you get it in this fiscal year.
That's correct. I'm sorry, I didn't know if you were waiting for me. So next slide, I believe. So, and as Hart was just questioning me on, there are fees associated with various stages of IIA. And those are stage 2, as you see here, stage 2, stage 4, and stage 5. And I kind of covered these. Stage 2 fees are the ones that Hart is saying. If you get your eligibility requirements in, and those are reviewed this fiscal year, you're not going to get charged those stage 2 fees. Stage 4 is a few years down the road for you. Let's say 2 to be, generous. If the budget and the fees as they stood when they were waived go back into place, then there would be some fees associated with review of your program standards at that time. And then, of course, site visit fees for your site visit, which are not just your provisional site visit, but there are fees that are charged to every institution every 7 years when they have their site visit. This is an important thing to know. Once you submit your eligibility requirements, if fees were being charged, I guess we could have taken this slide out. The important gist of this slide is, while the commission is authorized to assess fees and to receive fees, there is language in statute that says basically that fees that are received by the commission are considered earned upon receipt and cannot be refunded. There are ways to get a refund if you feel that one is really due to you, but you have to submit a request through the California Victim Compensation and Government Claims Board. So it is possible, but it comes in the form of that refund. And it's mostly because we don't have the legal authority to cut checks to people. We have no way to actually transmit money from ourselves to someone else in that way as a fee refund. So it's convoluted, but it's possible. And I know that some institutions have done it in some cases where it was necessary for them. So just know that. So fees that are associated with the regular accreditation cycle. And these are for institutions that are in what I'm calling our 7-year accreditation cycle. There is a two-part fee structure, as I sort of mentioned earlier to you. There is an institution fee, which is assessed based on the number of recommendations that the institution has submitted over over 3 years. So it's an average of over 3 years. So that's basically the number of candidates that are coming out of your program. And then there's a program fee that's assessed to you based on the number of programs that you have, that you're offering at your institution. So if you offer multiple subject and special ed, mild, moderate, and pupil personnel services, school counseling, and a reading, that's 5 programs that you're offering, you'll be assessed a program fee times 5. The reason for this structure is initially we were assessing fees on institutions based only on the number of programs they offered. And for some institutions, they said, hey, that doesn't feel fair because we only have 3 people in this reading program, but we're paying as much for that as we're paying for the multiple subject program. Or we're paying as much for our multiple subject program with 17 candidates as the school down the road who has 100 candidates. So we came up with this second tier level that talked about the number of candidates in the program. Part of it is, and this gets really convoluted and it may be just TMI, these annual accreditation fees are assessed and they come into us. And then when institutions have their site visit, there is an output of monies for the site visit for hotel, meals, and meeting rooms. After the site visit, the institution then invoices us. We enter into a contract for the site visit. You invoice us, we pay you. It's almost a one-to-one, these annual accreditation fees cycling from us back to you at the time of the site visit, almost. So we wanted the fees to be associated with the number of programs and the number of candidates that you have, because that's how we determine how large the site visit team will be. And since you're for the site visit paying sort of on a per person basis for meals and rooms, et cetera, it seems the most fair to assess the fees in that way. So, but again, they've been suspended for right now, and who knows if they'll get put back into place, what that will look like in the future. But this is what it looks like right now. So again, just operating under the assumption that the fees will be reinstituted once you're fully approved. So you've gone all the way through stage 5. These annual accreditation fees are assessed every year on July 1st for both your operational, so approved, and also any inactive programs that you might have. And again, I'll just birdwalk here a little bit. Your programs can have a number of sort of status levels that are somewhat, well, almost entirely determined by you. Active programs are just what they sound like. They're programs, you got candidates coming in on whatever your matriculation basis is, and they're moving through your program, and et cetera. If you determine that maybe you don't want to offer a certain program, let's say it's not cost effective for you anymore, you have a couple of choices. You can determine, you can decide to have that, to request inactive status for that program, which means the program is technically still on the books and could technically still be reviewed at a site visit, even if you don't have candidates in it. Sometimes for inactive, you still have a few candidates and you're kind of teaching them out. Your other option is withdraw the program entirely. And the difference between inactive and withdrawn is if you withdraw your program entirely and then you decide a year or 2 or 5 or 10 later that you want to bring it back up again, but I think 1 or 2 years, that you want to go ahead and start offering that program again, you have to go through the initial program approval process. You have to respond to standards, you have to get approved. So it's a little more onerous. And certainly if standards have changed, obviously it may be a lot more onerous. Whereas if you have an inactive program, programs are allowed to stay inactive for up to 5 years. And if during that 5-year cycle, you want to make it active again, it's much more easy to request the COA allow you to reactivate that program. You can pretty much immediately start bringing candidates back in. But if you do leave it inactive for 5 years, you'll be asked to either open it up again or fully withdraw. So you can really only rest on that inactive status for about 5 years. So that was a big, big bird walk. It's all in the accreditation handbook. It's all stuff that you don't have to worry about till you're much further down this road. But annual fees, again, are assessed based on what's currently active and even inactive programs, because you might reactivate them at any time. So you'll get an invoice following July 1 after those are assessed. And then the fees are due on September 1st and are considered late on November 1st, which means you could be assessed a late fee. And if you do not pay on time, not only could you be assessed a late fee, but depending on how late you are, we can shut down your ability to recommend your candidates. So if the accreditation fees aren't paid, we'll cut that off for you. Your candidates will be a little bit stuck and they won't be happy. So that we don't usually get that far with an institution. All right, so just a few things to remember, because there's been a lot as you move forward. This is Michelle's slide.
Yes,
please, Michelle. I was just ready to keep going.
That's okay. That's all right. So I'm assuming that your heads are probably pretty darn full right now, but that we also hope we have an understanding that developing and implementing an educator preparation program is not a simple task, and that hopefully you can see why it might take up to 5 years before full approval. So this is why early on Cheryl said, perhaps start small. Rather than offering 5, maybe offer 2. So you offer those nice solid program. So this process and completing this process really is a commitment from the leadership of both the institution as a whole, as well as the program. So now as you move through, there are a few things to remember. I think it's, we've mentioned a few times that sometimes the standards and requirements change. But when that happens, there are lots of avenues that we have to share that information with you. So it's incumbent on our part to give you the information and incumbent on your part to find out about the information. So if you're making program changes, I mean, Erin actually gave the example of the institution. So any changes that you make, please talk with your IIA consultant. We want to make sure that you stay in alignment. Keeping your documents up to date. Again, this can take a while. So we know that personnel changes, just make sure the documentation stays up to date with you. Erin talked about that inactive withdrawal process and what those options are. Again, what you can do is talk with your consultant about which one do you think is going to be best for you right then and there. So once you have gone through the process, the candidate recommendations, are done online. You will receive that information. Again, when you get there, it's a few years down the road, but know that we'll help you with that. And there are some resources that we will give you as far as for that accreditation. But the next piece of information you're going to get from us is the IIA application, which will be emailed to you. And that's where you want to really give some thought to how many programs can you realistically, with the amount of work that you now know goes into it, how many programs can you realistically choose to offer? So we ask that you give that some pretty good consideration.
Now, everyone, you all have received the application already. Though,
okay.
Right? Yes, I've just asked you to hold off until after today to complete it. Just to know that they don't need to wait for something else.
Okay, great. So if you go to the next slide. Oh, you're there. Never mind. So aside from the IIA consultants, these are some very valuable resources that you'll want to keep in mind. And again, bookmark them. I work here and I have them bookmarked. So definitely use them. There is also the credential. I always put California in the wrong part in here. The Credential Counselor and Analyst of California. There is a conference, thank you, a conference that they have every year. We strongly recommend that at least your credential analyst, whoever will be recommending your candidates, attend, if not one or two others. There'll be a lot of resources for that. You can access the Credential Handbook, which both Cheryl and Erin have mentioned, on our website. There's a lot to explore there. And something that you might consider doing is actually becoming a BIR reviewer. If you feel like that you have that time. It is training that provides a deep understanding of what we're looking for, and practice reading and analyzing other institutions' submissions will help you develop your own submissions as well. So also want to make sure that you attend to trainings. We offer, particularly, actually, will you go back to the previous slide? The PSD e-news is definitely something, if you haven't already done it, do it today. That is probably the single most comprehensive piece of resource for you that we have. It has information on everything that we do here. It's in this PSD news that you'll find out about webinars, training, other activities that we do here at the CTC that will help you in gaining information as you go through this process. So that's actually a really key piece.
I'm just going to jump in. I know we all subscribe to so many things. It's really, really easy to unsubscribe should you choose to. So you won't be dedicated to us and our information in perpetuity if you sign up. It's easy to unsubscribe. So, and it just comes straight to your inbox once a week on Friday afternoons.
Yes. And what's nice is it is actually separated between new news and ongoing news. So it's actually very easy to scan it and see if something applies to you, and then delve in deeper or not. So it's actually, it's very well designed for that.
Michelle, do you have a note on here? I apologize because I haven't seen these last few slides about technical assistance, office hours that are available.
I don't have anything that identifies it.
That's okay. It's in the e-news.
Okay.
And folks, it may be potentially a little over your head at this point, but we do have a lot of program-specific technical assistance office hours, right? They're virtual, and we do a number of them about every other week. And right now we have some that are specific to multiple single subject, special ed, pupil personnel services, induction, and early childhood education. We've really gotten in the groove with these virtual office hours this last year. They were really, really necessary, but we've gotten a lot of great feedback. So we'll continue to do those. If you come, you can just come and listen. There's no, they've really been formulated as a way for, if we have some important new information to offer folks in those program areas, we'll bring it. But for the most part, it's staff sort of showing up and answering questions and encouraging a lot of collaboration and sharing of best practices across programs. So a lot of it is us facilitating programs, maybe from different institutions, working out their own solutions with maybe a little bit of commission oversight. So they can be interesting, and there are all the times and dates and links are all listed in that e-news. So right. I guess I'm just plugging the e-news a little bit more, but there's a lot there.
I have a quick question. I think you mentioned to go and look at other programs that are submitting. Is that right on the website that we can be able to click on other program submissions so we can kind of see that?
Yeah, if you just reach out to us, we can even just point you in the right direction. They're all in agenda items on our website currently, and within all of those, there are links to the submissions themselves.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And they are public documents, so it's okay that you see them. Okay. I think we have talked about this. It's incumbent on you, incumbent on us to talk about the trainings with you, incumbent on you to attend the trainings and participate in webinars and keep yourself informed. And definitely whoever is the identified person responding to requests for information, and then again keep the program sponsor contacts updated.
Regarding the CCAC conference that Michelle had brought up earlier, this will be held later this year. Erin, do you know if it's going to be in November again? Or
it will be in November, and I apologize that we haven't. The commission. It's not our conference, but the commission provides the majority of the sessions at the conference. So they're really great about working with us on what times work. And they had suggested the week of Veterans Day, which does not work for our staff because state employees do not work on Veterans Day. So we are hoping right now it will be the first week in November. And that is something that will be announced certainly in the e-news when we find out. But you can also go out to the CCAC website and find out about registration for that.
Yeah, and I would recommend, if you can, registering at least someone, potentially whomever will be your credential analyst for the conference, because there's really, really good introductory information that is provided.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, both introductory and in-depth. But they have very specific sessions for brand new credential analysts and institutions. And there's also, I think it's at that conference where there's the room where you can just go in and simply ask questions. Okay. So questions and submissions during the IIA process should go to the address you see here. But as we've said throughout today, you will have an assigned consultant so that you can have one-on-one conversations. So you can access your consultants before you have a consultant assigned, you can also use this email address. Those third-party comments that we talked about where they can sing your praises, here's the address where that will be. And that can also be on your the webpage. So any questions right now? That's a lot of information, and some of the information you won't even use for 3 years. But anything that we can clarify for you right now?
That good, huh? All right. Well, if there aren't any questions right now, feel free to just email us at iaa@ctc.ca.gov at any point, and we will go ahead and get you those answers that you need. Otherwise, we really thank you all for your time and your patience going through what is a fairly hefty presentation with a lot of information in it. I'm sure that there will be some questions along the way, but just know that we are here to help you move through this process. Should you choose to go through it after today, who knows? Maybe we scared off some of you. I'm not sure. But otherwise, it's Friday, and I would like to send you all off with well wishes, and I hope you all have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.